Early game Pokemon. They're like your Pidgeys, your Rattatats. They're supposed to be your training wheel Pokemon, you know, the ones that are good to show you the ropes and ease you into the game. But once you find something bigger and better, you'll usually replace these guys and have them sit in a box forever and ever. Now, I'm not saying all early game Pokemon are meant to be replaced at some point. No, actually, there are some exceptionally good ones that performs really well throughout the entirety of a Pokemon game. Now, what qualifies as an early game Pokemon? Well, the answer is simple. To me, these Pokemon appear anywhere from when you start the game to around the time you face the very first gym leader. And you know what? I don't think we need to make it any more complicated than that. So here are 10 of the best early game Pokemon you should pick up. Alright, starting off the list at number 10 is Nidoran. More specifically, the male version for its offensive capabilities. They appear in the red, blue, and yellow games, and you have access to them as early as Route 22, which is just west of Viridian City. Now, Nidorans are pretty versatile in the stats department, which makes them a great fit for pretty much any team. Not to mention, they have a pretty wide move pool, learning powerful attacks like Fire Blast, Earthquake, Ice Beam, Thunderbolt, and the list just goes on. They evolve pretty early on too, and you can even get Nidoking before the second gym. Speaking of gym, first up is Brock. In red and blue, this matchup would be quite neutral as Nidoran didn't have anything that is super effective against rock types. However, in Pokemon Yellow, they actually have the advantage as they learn Double Kick at an early level. Nidorino would go neutral against Misty, and if you decide to evolve Nidorino into Nidoking, then Nidoking should have the type advantage over Lieutenant Surge, Erica, and even Koga. Sabrina is a hard counter, so avoid her at all costs. Nidoking should have the advantage over Blaine, and as for Giovanni, well, with its wide move pool, you are going to have many super effective options to choose from. Of course, when it comes to the Pokemon League, only Lorelei is the hard counter, while Nidoking would either go neutral or have the type advantage against everyone else. Moving down to number 9, here I pick Teddiursa. Only available early in Pokemon Crystal, you can find this absolute chunker of a bear in the Dark Cave at around a 5% encounter rate. Being a pure normal type, Teddiursa doesn't have a lot of bad matchups. It has decent bulk and good attack power, meaning that it could hold its own against most gym leaders. It evolved into Ursaring at level 30, which is a perfect level range considering by then you'll start to face tougher opponents. Now, throughout the entirety of Pokemon Crystal, post-game bosses included, Ursaring would only struggle against the fighting type users like Chuck or Bruno. Gym leaders like Morty, Jasmine, and Brock might seem like hard matchups, but don't worry, Ursaring's move pool will 100% cover for those types. Ursaring gets access to Earthquake, Feint Attack, Bubble Beam, as well as the Elemental Punches. Those punches alone covers a wide variety of types, meaning that it's very possible for Ursaring to run through Generation 2 all by itself. Unfortunately, Pokemon Crystal is the only time you could get the Teddiursa line early into the game, so if you're playing Pokemon Crystal, give this one a chance. Number 8 on the list is Ralts from Generation 3. You can find Ralts in Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald, as well as the remakes Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. It appears on Route 102 at a 4% encounter rate, and it'll start out pretty weak, but given enough time and patience, Ralts becomes one of the best special attackers in the game. Now, when it comes to taking on the gym leaders, Ralts will struggle versus Roxanne as it's still weak and fragile early on. Brawly, on the other hand, is a guaranteed type advantage since Psychic beats Fighting. When Ralts fully evolve into Gardevoir, it gets access to powerful special attacks like Psychic, Shadow Ball, and Thunderbolt, all of which are great coverage against the likes of Riona, Tate and Liza, and even Wallace and or Juan. Not to mention, in the remakes, it gets access to even more coverage options like Moonblast, Focus Blast, Energy Ball, making it even better. As we head into the Pokemon League, Sydney, the Dark type user, is a hard counter, while you can kinda get by with Phoebe's Ghost types if you play it smart. Gardevoir would hold its ground against Glacia and Drake, while Steven will be a bit more of a challenge since Steel resists Psychic. Overall, Gardevoir is a pretty solid Pokemon, and you won't be disappointed with picking one up. Number 7 on this list was actually a pretty easy pick. My choice here is Starly. This Pokemon is a pretty common Pokemon throughout the Sinnoh games, and you can actually catch it as soon as you are given some Pokeballs. Starly will start off just like any other regional bird in the series, but the reason why it has an edge over all the other birds is because of Staraptor. Staraptor has 2 great features, and that is Intimidate and Close Combat. Being able to lower your opponent's attack power is huge in any level of play. Plus, close combat has excellent power and accuracy, and to be on a nimble flying type feels pretty much unfair. Staraptor has great coverage, and you'll get it in time to help with Byron the Steel type gym leader and Candace the Ice type gym leader. Technically speaking, you would have trouble with Rourke, the very first gym leader, because Starly would still be a Starly at that time. Now, Volkner Electric type would be the only hard counter for Staraptor, but everything else before and after that should be a cakewalk. Staraptor is actually great against the Gen 4 Elite Four. It can destroy Aaron's bug type and go neutral against Bertha, Flint, and Lucian. When it comes to Cynthia, it can at least take out her Roserade and Lucario, as well as crippling the Garchomp's attack power with Intimidate. Overall, you get great value for such a common Pokemon. Alright, on to number 6. Again, this was another easy pick, as this time around, I chose Lillipup. Lillipup is a very common Pokemon for the 5th generation of Pokemon games, so Black and White and Black 2 and White 2. It shares similarities with Ursaring, as it is also a normal type with good bulk and high attack power. I do think it has a few things over Ursaring though, and those would be much better speed, and it comes with the ability Intimidate. That ability alone cripples the majority of the Generation 5 roster, so it'll never be a dull moment with this tank of a dog. Anyways, Lillipup fully evolves into Scoutland at level 32, which again is a perfect level range. In terms of type matchups, since Scoutland is a pure normal type, it goes neutral against every single gym leader in Black and White, as well as Black 2 and White 2. For the Pokemon League, only Marshall is the hard counter, as fighting beats normal, and Chantel, the ghost type user, is scary, but Scoutland does have access to Crunch, a very reliable dark type attack. Otherwise, I don't have anything else to say about this Pokemon. It's goated from when you get it all the way to the end of the game. Jumping straight to number 5, this time around, it is the Fletchling family line. Fletchling shows up early in Pokemon X and Y, as well as Scarlet and Violet. This Pokemon is on the same boat as Starly, with it being more than just a typical regional bird. Being part fire type when it fully evolved makes it a very reliable offensive threat at all stages of any game it shows up in. It comes with powerful attacks like Flare Blitz and Brave Bird, along with healing capabilities with Roost. It could also support the team with Tailwind, making it low-key a jack of all trades. In Pokemon X and Y, Fletchling has the advantage against the likes of Viola, Corina, Ramos, Wolfric, and Wilkstrom, while Grant, Clement, and Siebel are of course the hard counters. In Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, it beats Katie, Brassius, Grusha, and Poppy from the Victory Road path, Orthworm, Great Tusk, and Iron Tread from the Titan path, and Airy from the Starfall Street path. Hard counter-wise, Fletchling would struggle against Iono, Kofu, Ortega, and Cloth. Furthermore, Gen 9 makes hidden ability a lot more accessible, so here, Talonflame could have access to Gale Wings, its hidden ability, which guarantee that it can move first in battle if it uses a flying type attack. If you need to quickly take out an opponent, Talonflame is the Pokemon for that. Moving right into number 4 on the list, I think this spot should be given to the Mankey family line. Mankey shows up early in a few Pokemon games, but it's most useful throughout Pokemon Yellow, Fire Red and Leaf Green, as well as Scarlet and Violet. It'll be a pure fighting type in its first 2 form, and it even gets the Ghost typing in Generation 9 when it evolves into Annihilate. The best way I can describe the Mankey family line is that they're all nimble fighters, with good speed and good attack power. Now, in the Generation 1 games, Mankey, along with Primate, could easily steamroll most of the bosses, with the exception of Koga, Sabrina, and Agatha, who are obvious counters. In Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, Annihilate becomes an option, and here I would say the hardest storyline for the whole family tree would be Starfall Street. Of course, this storyline has the Poison and Fairy boss fights, both of which either resist or are immune to most of Annihilate's attacks. Annihilate would do fairly well against most of the Titan Pokemon, except for Bombardier, since it is a flying type. Other than that, for a lack of a better word, this family of Pokemon will annihilate anything in their way. Whichever game you get this Pokemon in, it has always been useful and reliable through and through. Sitting at number 3 is Flamigo from Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. You can find this Pokemon in South Province Area 1, which is not too far away from where you start off the game. Flamigo is a flying and fighting type single stage Pokemon with a base stat total of 500. Not too many early game Pokemon can even come close to how juiced up this Pokemon is. Not to mention, Flamigo has access to the ability Scrappy, allowing it to hit ghost types with normal and fighting type attacks, along with blocking Intimidate. Its move pool and learn sets are also insane as well, with options like Throat Chop, Liquidation, Close Combat, Sword Dance, and even Brave Bird. This thing can hold its own against most bosses in the game, with a few exceptions for the likes of Iono, Flying-type Larry, Tulip, and Ortega. As a bit of a side note, it's so good that it's often used in speedruns in the early days of Scarlet and Violet. Anyways, don't sleep on this Pokemon. It might look goofy, but it's one of the best early game Pokemon in Generation 9. Number 2 on the list comes from the Alola games, that being Pokemon Sun and Moon, as well as the Ultra games. The next Pokemon is kinda insane though. It took me a little over an hour to find, and honestly, I'm just happy I have footage for it in general. But anyways, on the very first island, which is Meli Meli Island, you can find Bagon as early as Route 3 at a 1% encounter rate. Now, if you're patient enough, you could actually encounter a Salamence at another 1% chance with the SOS feature introduced in Generation 7. Now, I don't know what the catch rates are for a Salamence with just Pokeballs at that early into the game, but if you somehow manage to catch it, well, let's just say you pretty much won the game. Anyways, Bagon is a fantastic Pokemon to get early into the game. It's a pseudo-legendary, so naturally it has better stats than most of the common Pokemon you would find on Meli Meli Island. When it evolves into Shogun, it gets a bit more defensive, but once it becomes a Salamence, it's pretty much a force of nature. Now, as a Dragon type, the Bagon family doesn't really have a ton of bad matchups. Ice and Fairy types are rare in Generation 7, and you don't really face a ton of Dragon types until much late into the game, and at that point, you should have a powerful Salamence by your side. Now, only Olivia's Pokemon League team is a hard matchup for Salamence due to the fact that it's weak to rock types, but other than that, you'll have a very solid Pokemon for the majority of your time going through Generation 7. Alright, and now for the final Pokemon on this list, I'm giving this one over to Riolu. Riolu appears early in 4 separate generations, that being Black 2, White 2, X and Y, Sword and Shield, and Scarlet and Violet. Riolu and eventually Lucario are fantastic mixed attackers with a very expansive move pool. They have stats similar to most starters, making them pretty well balanced all around. Riolu as a fighting type doesn't really have a bunch of bad matchups, and once it evolves into Lucario, it gains a steel typing, which helps it out defensively. On top of all that, in Generation 6, Lucario even gets a Mega Evolution as well. Since Lucario is weak to fire, fighting, and ground types, Clay and Marshall from Black 2 and White 2 are obvious hard counters, and so it's Karina and Malva from X and Y. For the Generation 8 games, if you have Pokemon Sword, then Bia is a hard counter, otherwise Lucario goes neutral or has the advantage against the rest of the boss trainers. Now, Generation 9 is pretty crazy with how many bosses there are in the game, but when it comes down to it, Lucario will only struggle with Mila and Aerie from Starfall Street, Great Tusk from Scarlet, and Rika of the Pokemon League. Otherwise, Lucario is pretty goated with the extra sauce. It'll always be a reliable Pokemon at any stage of the game, and because it shows up early in so many generations, that's why it deserves the #1 spot for this video.